Check, check, check. Chick-a-doodle-doo. Run up time. Run up time is here. Run up time. 5 minutes until we officially begin. 5 minutes. 5 minutes and counting. Sound check. Are we checking? Are we checking? Someone check me. Someone check me before I wreck me. Yay. Oh, it's a beautiful sunny day in Southern Ohio. And I'm stuck inside at a desk. Oh, cool. Lobo says it sounds good. If Lobo says it sounds good, he's going to be the authority. Thank you, Lobo. Lobo has spoken. Lobo has spoken. Yeah. Doody doody doo. Doodle doo doo doo. Oh, yes, there is caffeine and acetaminophen talking because I have a vicious headache. But it's okay. We'll put on the happy face. Hello. 4 minutes. 4 minutes and counting. 4 minutes. 4 minutes and counting. Hello, do 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 do. Let's see, where is that thing I was thinking about? There was something I was thinking about. Oh, doom, here we go. Just gonna put these little fellers on screen. Cause it's pretty cool. Yay. Where's that? Yes, 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 yes. Run up time is always fun because I don't actually have to say anything meaningful. I can just jibber jabber for a minute and make sure that everything is working. Oh, doody doody doo. Alien chicks everywhere. Alien chicks everywhere. Alien chicks who have no noses. Alien chicks with quite long toeses. Alien chicks are everywhere. And we have 2 minutes. So, bing bang. Bing bang. There's only one thing left for me to do, mama. I got a ding-a-ding-dang, my dang-along, ling-long. Somebody get the reference, please. Oh, I'm gonna have to go listen to that now. We got any other Ministry fans out there? Because that's what I'm referencing. For those who don't know, Ministry. A lovely little ditty called "Jesus Built My Hot Rod." I love that one. Mm-hmm. That's right. I'm gonna ding-a-ling-dang, my dang-along-ling-long. Well, 1 minute. I'm gonna close up the shop doors. Goodbye, world. Goodbye, world. It's almost time. The doors are closed. Everyone here in It's the weekly closing of the doors that tells the rest of the family Daddy is working. All right, folks, it is 5 o'clock, and we are back for another week of the content artist development series here from CGBytes. I am Les from 6S1, and I'm going to take a moment to glance at my lovely chat window and see who's here, because I always like to do that and say hello to everyone. Hola, ¿qué pasa, señor and señoritas? And joining us today, we have in the chat, of course, Mr. Loki and Miss Terry from CGBytes. Howdy, folks. Let's see, I see Matt Pitts was here bright and early. Lobo 3433, my ad hoc sound check guy for the day. Thank you, Mr. Lobo, for your input on that earlier. Let's see who else. Who else? Jay Hudson joins us. Howdy, Mr. Jay. And the ever-present Mr. Reggie. Howdy, Reg. How y'all doing today? All right. So, this week, we have one more week left. Next week, we're closing up shop on this particular series. Today, we're taking the next step in our Alien Allure series. I love that name. It's almost a tongue-in-cheek sort of hokey kind of name, but there it is. I kind of like it. So, oh, Terry. Yeah, I got a question in the chat from Terry. She's like, why did it say Zbrush Summit? Well, that's because with Zbrush 4R8, when you open the program, they now have a window that pops up that gives you news direct from Pixelogic. So that's what that is. There was stuff there about the current Zbrush Summit dealio and all that stuff. So there's that. So today we are continuing with the Alien Allure series, and we're going to be focusing on texturing. And as you folks who've watched a lot of the videos and followed us for a while know, I'm a big advocate of a combined workflow of both modeling or sculpting and texturing at the same time. I've kind of separated that out just a bit on this series for a number of reasons, but not completely. So I want to go load up the ZTL that I've been using for most of this. And we're going to take a little walk through what has been done and compare it to what you guys have access to currently in the form of the Alien Allure freebie that we gave away. And I want you to be able to sort of see kind of where it starts in ZBrush and actually be able to compare it to an endpoint, which is why I went ahead and did the work to put that out in advance. That way you already had the results of where I was going with this series, and you'd be able to compare. So I wish I could actually give you guys the ZTL I'm using right here, but unfortunately you can't really do that. That violates DASI ULA on the mesh of the Genesis figures, on mesh of any of their figures, and so I can't legally do that. Otherwise I would, because it would be a great learning resource, but you know, legalities being what they are, you can't do that. So the next best thing was to go ahead and take it to completion, release it, and put it in your hands so you guys could look at that. Oh, no. In the chat, Jason, he's like, that's not this week's freebie. No, that's not this week's freebie, but it is a freebie. It's a freebie that's out. I believe we put that out last week, didn't we? Last week or the week before. So there's also the Alien Creation Kit freebie that it either is out or it's coming soon. I handed that off to Terry just the other day, And that should be coming. If it's not there today, it'll be there soon, you guys. Very handy little kit. And anyway, we'll be going over that at some point. Let's see. Oh yeah, getting some chatter back from Jason in the chat. 3D Loki, that's Jason. Okay, cool. Little, oh, he's holding back. He's showing y'all a little bit of leg and then covering it up on the freebie. So I think there's that. All right. So like I was saying, I wanted to go ahead and push forward to a completed state so I could share that with you guys, and then you'd be able to compare the finished product with the methods that I'm using, and then be able to see where I was at in the course of working on that. So I want to go back over to DS for a moment, and of course here you see on screen the Alien Allure package in all her pinkish purplish glory. And what I'm going to be doing here today, I'm going to bring this over to Zbrush and show you guys how we can very quickly do a whole new texture set based on this. And after the seminar today is over, I'm going to package up that texture set, hand it off to Terry, and then she'll distribute that to you guys as yet another freebie in this series. Whenever that goes through the proper channels at CGBytes. But you guys are going to see textures developed live that will be put in your hands that'll be comparable to what you see on here already. So you're actually going to get more content out of this. And I'm going to give you a little look, because as I go through it, you're going to see kind of the process that I use to get these textures. And as I'm building up a new set. So I hope that kind of makes sense. So you can see here too that with these textures you get a lot of the sculpt, just through the normal mapping and displacement and all that stuff. So it's a very cool thing, and it's something that even though in a way, like, I've gone over it a few times, it's something that you can never go over enough, because the process of doing this is something that needs to become, like, if you're serious about trying to use trying to make this stuff, and to me, if you're serious about this, you're going to be using some high-end tools at some point. You're going to be moving into a Zbrush or a Mari or a Substance, or even like a 3D Coat. Those are all great tools. My tool of choice is Zbrush for most things. And so you're going to be seeing, this process, and you see this repeated a lot. If you watch through the videos, you're going to see a lot of the same stuff. But that repetition, I think, helps drive home how reflexive these processes really should become. Like, if you really want to be successful doing this stuff, whether it's content or whether it's moving beyond the content world and into the larger world of 3D production with, film, animation, gaming, whatever, these processes really need to become reflexive, so that you don't have to think about it. All your conscious thought really should end up going into creating the art itself. The actual processes, you should really work and practice and practice and practice over and over and over and over and over. Hearing it over and over helps. It's all repetition. You have to do these things a lot to make them habit. So that's why, sometimes I wonder if maybe I don't go over some of the same things a time or two too many. But then I think about it, and it's like, well, no, because repetition, as in my martial arts training, my sensei there would say repetition is the mother of retention. You have to repeat things to retain them. So hopefully that theme kind of rings true with folks, and you guys will take that to heart. Practice, do the stuff all the time as much as you can. and you know, hopefully you'll welcome hearing some of the same things again. Also, you might hear them in a different way. So here, as I said, here's our example of the Alien Allure kit. I want to take a moment over inside Zbrush to kind of show you what this looks like in its raw Zbrushy form. All right. So over here in Zbrush, of course, you see, you know, it is the lovely little G3 female mesh, and we are at, there's 2 subdivisions, 3, 4, and 5. And on this kit, I stopped at 5 subdivisions, which brings us to an active point total of 4.3 million polys. Sometimes I would actually go up 1 more subdivision. On this design, I didn't see the need to go super granular. I wasn't out for getting tiny little pores and, you know, things that are just almost microscopic. And there's a real value, I think, in understanding the nature of resolution and of detail and how to adapt your work to your design. So here, with this character and this set of skins, I really didn't need some of those tiny little things that you only get once you get up around 16 to 20 million polygons. And I'm glad, actually. I think that there's a lot to be said for teaching yourself to only use the resolution you need. There are some real benefits to that. And also, there is something to be said for recognizing the importance of color and larger applications of color, more painterly applications of color, as opposed to the stamping in of tiny little details. There's kind of a pet peeve I have, to be honest, with a lot of texture work that I see in the content world, where so much of it is taking photographs and stamping them in. That's it. It's placing a photograph over an area, stamping it in. Okay, now let's blend the edges of that out and stamp something else in. And there's nothing wrong with that. Totally valid technique. Totally valid. Can get some great results. I use it sometimes, especially with Spotlight. But there's always a but. And this time, you know, it's about a size 22. Pretty, you know, it's a nice wide butt. The issue I have with that is that there is a very real quality of painterliness. There's a very real set of qualities that can come from paint and just using colors and using colors creatively and using colors well that is dramatically lost on much of the texture making wing of the content market. Between texture resources, stamping photos, you know, plugins that do texturing for you, between all these things, there's a I'm going to use a big word, there's a homogeneity that I find in a lot of the textures that I see. There's a lot of sameness. A lot of the stuff, pardon me, comes out looking the same. Even when people are trying to do things like aliens and more fantastic sort of creatures and things like that, a lot of it comes out looking the same. And when you're working on top of base meshes that everybody has access to, it's crucial to set yourself apart from the crowd by doing things that look different. So the morphs, you need to push for shapes that people haven't seen before. Your surface details need to be tight, solid. They need to stand out. They need to speak beyond just, just what you're trying to do. Like, it's not just skin wrinkles. They need to have character and purpose to them. And your colors, your actual textures, your actual texture files, those texture maps, those things need to have some art to them beyond just stamps. They really do. There's so much stuff out there that's like that, that when you do those kind of products, you're going to get lost with the herd. And even when you're doing something that is a quote-unquote realistic character, I find that quite often being able to give a little hint of paint here and there, a little touch of shadow, or a little warmth painted in sometimes, little touches like that, that the other folks who are just stamping things in don't think about, those are the things that will set you apart. And not only do they set you apart, but it makes for better work. I mean, your stuff will just look better, hands down. So that's something that I really wanted to focus on with this particular series, was the painterly approach to texturing. So here you can see throughout my choices of color in this character, I've really worked to create a sense of warmth. And also I wanted to create a sense of interest. Okay? And to do that requires sort of giving the viewer a color palette that reads with whatever the mood is that you want. And then having lights and darks that guide the eye from place to place in the way that you want. So the name of the series was Alien Allure. So if we, hopefully this won't bog down too much. Here we go. Let's solo this. There we go. So, I gave her a certain amount of smoky painted in color and color noise around the eyes. And then I used the thrust of my color to guide the eye, guide your eye, the viewer's eye, toward the eyes and the mouth. We've used kind of makeup type techniques to enhance the cheekbones. Created a sense of warmth around the ears, all that. And you can see here that there's kind of mottling. I hate that word because it always sounds like I'm going to say modeling, so I overpronounce my T's and go mottling. But there's mottling throughout the skin, especially in the outside, where I wanted to give this feeling of warmth. And my concept on the character is almost like some kind of bioengineered, this sounds awful, but some kind of bioengineered alien prostitute almost. Something, she would be an otherworldly pole dancer almost. And I wanted her to have this kind of warmth that is attractive, that, it's like you want to touch warm things. It just as creepy as that sounds. God, that's really creepy when I say it. So those kind of considerations play heavily into, the coloring, and then also just making sure that I have warmth in places that should be warm, places that have high blood flow. So I think that's enough for kind of taking a look at what we have. Let's go ahead and kick this out, and I'll do a restart of ZBrush to do that. And let's send our figure with its shape and everything. Let's send that over to ZBrush. And we'll give that just a moment. While that's loading, I see a few more people have joined us. I see Jeremy Terrier, Miss V, and Mike Keon, and who else? Russ Barrett. Hello, Mr. Russ. All right. So now getting into the nuts and bolts side of this, since we've kind of talked a little bit about the conceptual aspects of it. We took the figure, once we got the morphs and everything on it, and have sent that over to Zbrush via GoZ. And in case it's a little confusing, I do have a key command set up for that on my end, but you can get to it right here from File, Send to Zbrush. And once we are in Zbrush, we have our usual set of protocols we need to go through to set things up, or at least to set things up the way I like to for painting in here. So I'm going to turn on polyframe, and I'm going to switch to a skin shader. It's just brighter and gives me a nice truthful indication of color. Then let's go over to our polygroups menu, and we're going to hit UV groups, which will give us polygroups based on UDIM tiles. And for a deeper explanation of UDIM, just Google UDIM. Trust me, you'll be reading for a while. It's great fun. I've actually talked about UDIM in some depth before. So today I'm going to try this new thing that I've been accused of not having called brevity, and gloss back over it just a little bit. So there are a couple things I need to do next, or that I like to do. I shouldn't say need to do. We could go ahead and subdivide this and start texturing it. But I want to pull copies of the eyes, eye moisture, and eyelashes all out into their own subtool. I don't want to actually remove them though, because if I remove them from this, then any sculpting that happens to happen while I'm painting, I wouldn't be able to send that back over. So since I'm doing another texture set, odds are there's going to be some sculpting, because I like, well, there's definitely going to be some sculpting. There's going to be some small surface details sculpted, and I want to be able to capture any mesh changes that come with that. So in order to do that, I have to keep the original mesh intact, which means I can't delete anything from it, or it won't transfer back over as a morph. But for the sake of texture integrity, I might want to break off some of those maps, because, for instance, if we were to go ahead and subdivide this, which let's go ahead and take this up to 5 sub-Ds. And that's going to get us back to that 4.357 million polygon level. Well, at that level, if I select just the eyelashes, they only have 66,000 points. That isn't nearly enough resolution to hold any kind of texturing for those. And the same is going to be true for the eye moisture. It's 91,000 polys. It's just not enough resolution, to be able to hold anything. So, in order to, let's just back this up. In order to give myself copies of those elements that I can do textures on very easily, what I will do is, at some point, I usually go ahead and do it at the beginning. You could wait and do it at the end if you wanted, but at some point I will make duplicates. So here I just duplicated my subtool, and I'm in solo mode, so I'm not actually seeing the original right here. And I'll go into my duplicate and hold Control Shift and click on this group for the eyelashes, and that will select it, meaning it'll hide everything else. And once the other stuff is all hidden, then I'll go into my Geometry tab and hit Delete Hidden. So now, if I arrow back up, I'll go back up to my original subtool. Now I'm going to do the same thing, holding Control Shift and click on the eye moisture. Excuse me, oh, sorry. I need to duplicate that subtool. Now, Control Shift, click on the eye moisture group and delete hidden. And now if I arrow down, there's my eyelashes. Arrow up, there's my eye moisture. Now I have one more group to separate, and that's going to be my eye textures, which is this stuff right here. So let's duplicate our subtool again. And sometimes you have to get a little tricky with getting that inner eye mesh to be the only thing visible. A strategy that I like to use for that, I mean, if you want, you could sort of, if you look for some of these lines that you'll see kind of ghost their way through, you might be able to click and get it. But a more reliable method is to hide the face group, then hide the lashes group, then hide that eye moisture group, and then just select those. And then we'll delete hidden. So once we have that, let's name these. So we'll rename this to, let's see, eye textures. Let's just call it eyes. Then this will be eyes moisture. Moist. I hate that word so much. And here we have the eyelashes. All right. So once we have these separated, here we have the original, fully intact, all of the meshes there. I can arrow down now into these others. And what that's going to do is give us the ability now to subdivide copies of these. So if we take this, the eyes right here, and we can also change their poly grouping. Let's do an auto group with UV and then merge similar groups. So now we have the actual eyeball, and they've done this kind of oddball thing. I don't really care for it, but they actually have a little cornea bulb sticking out from it like that, which I find kind of strange, but whatever. So now we have separated poly groups for everything, and there's that. There's that, all that fun stuff. And then we can subdivide that. And if you watch up here now, we'll go, see, here's 5 sub D, 6, 7. So it takes about 7 subdivisions for the eyes to actually be able to hold anything. And if we had the eyes, had all these smaller elements still in the original mesh, and we subdivided it up 7 times, you're going to be in the neighborhood of, oh, good grief. I want to say around 80 million polys. I don't know very many people who are going to be able to push that, pardon me, even in Zbrush. And you shouldn't have to. You know, something like this that isn't contiguous to the rest of the mesh, there's no good reason to do it that way. So 4, 5, 6, 7 subdivisions on the moisture, and 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 levels of subdivision on the lashes. So now those all have subdivision, and they're waiting for if we want to do any textures on those. Now today I don't really need to do textures on those because I already have those that I'm perfectly happy to use out of the rest of the Alien Allure kit. So we're going to focus on the skin today, but I wanted to step through that process and show you the setup for having each of those separated out, because that's an important thing. It's a really valuable workflow trick that will help you avoid some issues that can come up if you were to try and do that all in just the base mesh. So, glancing over the chat, I saw a comment that I could use the split hidden. I'm thinking that's probably from a couple minutes back when I was hiding and showing things. I could use split hidden, but the reason that I do it, the process that I do, where I'm selective and I delete geometry from duplicates, is if I use a split hidden, from the original. I mean, I guess I could probably break it up where I take a duplicate and then just delete everything except the ones I want and then split by groups. There's a few different strategies you could use there. But the reason that I do it the way that I do it is really organizational in a way, because it helps me kind of confirm to myself and reaffirm that, okay, I have this. Okay, now I know I have this. Now I know I have this. These 3 different parts. And it prevents me, doing it with that series of techniques prevents me from accidentally harming the base mesh, so that anything I do will now transfer over as morphs as well as in generating my texture. I hope that makes sense. It's kind of an in the weeds sort of nuanced little thing to discuss a little bit, but it's it's just one of those little things about how I like to work. So, all right, from here we are ready to subdivide the base figure and proceed with the actual act of texturing. So we'll do a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4. And here we've subdivided 4 times. And just an interesting little thing to note, Zbrush starts from a value of 1. So in Zbrush, your lowest subdivision level is 1. So if you subdivide 4 times in Zbrush, you're at a level 5. Subdivisions in DAZ Studio start from 0. So everything's offset by 1. So a 0 level with no subdivision in DAZ is a 1 in Zbrush. And a 1 in DAZ is a 2 in Zbrush, and so on. So there are some situations you can get into sometimes where knowing that can be just a helpful thing. So just kind of file that little tidbit away. All right, the next thing we need to do once we have our subdivisions, this is a personal thing. This is just something that I like to do. Rather than, like, we could go down to the polypaint menu and hit colorize, and then it's going to be ready to polypaint. But it's going to start out with a default white, and I never want to paint into white. I find that the way polypaint works, if you think about it, and I've described polypaint in depth on here before, where polypaint is an RGB value per vertex. Well, something about it, and it's hard to say because I didn't write the program and I don't know the underpinnings of that, but something about the way applying color data in here works. When you're applying color to pure white, it takes a while for it to build up before it really shows up with the kind of clarity. It's like white is a very dominating color when you're using polypaint. So I actually like to start from either a dark, a color that's in the range of what my overall palette is going to be, and a dark version of that, or I'll start from pure black. Pure black brings out the clearest colors when you're painting with polypaint. So a lot of times I just flood with black and then go from there. Not always. I used to always do it. Over time, I've kind of drifted away from that, where maybe I'll start with a darker pink or a dark blue or blah, 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 something like that. But I do always start with some kind of a color, fully flooded, and usually in the darker spectrum. So, also see there's a comment from Dark Seal about save a morph target before dividing, gives more accurate displacement bump maps later. It can play into it. There are some ways that you can generate those maps that will take that into account. The way that I like to generate them is pretty straightforward, and it doesn't really... I've kind of tested it back and forth, and it doesn't really make that much of a... It actually doesn't seem to make any difference, honestly, in the way that I like to generate those. But it all depends, and that's the thing, is like there's a lot of different ways to do this stuff. And the different techniques kind of correspond to different needs you may have in the course of what you're working on. So with what we're doing here, this is actually a really simple, in my mind, a really simple sort of character. And we don't need to get into some of those, you know, there are things where you can go through and do, oh, let's see. I'll have to go digging for it again. But places where you can go through and do baking that's based more on the shape and all that kind of stuff. And it's more than we want to get into here. This is much more kind of a much simpler sort of approach. But that's okay. Nothing wrong with that. So let's go ahead and decide. I really, for an alternate color, I want to pick something that's going to present a contrast to this if you were to use two of them in a scene. So here we have this overriding pink purple. So let's say that's kind of in this spectrum, roughly. So let's maybe push something a little, I don't know, let's go for an orange. And then let's bring that down so that I'm starting from a darker base. Right about there. And once I'm there, I'll hit Fill Object. And you'll see that that turns my polypaint to colorize. And from here, we're pretty much ready to start kind of having some fun with it. So I'm going to really focus on kind of painterly texturing techniques today. And before I get too deep into that, there's one other thing that I want to go ahead and do. And I'll do this kind of as a temporary measure. But I'll take everything that I know I want to paint on as contiguous mesh and group it all together. And then these elements here that I might want to hide or show from time to time, I'll group them. Although I do, actually I want to change that. Let's group, there we go. I'm going to keep the eyelashes separate. And this little moisture tab right here, this little guy, I'm going to put that into its own poly group. That way, as I paint, I can have this stuff available. And if I happen to move an eyelid a little bit or something like that, it's not going to, I can do that and keep these things, you know, basically tied really tightly to it. So then all of the eyeball related meshes now I'll have in their own poly group. And it's just a little bit of organization there before I get into the whole process. So now that I've organized my poly groups, you can see I've started off by masking the eyes and inner mouth elements. Now I'm going to run my subdivisions all the way up. And we're going to start off with our standard brush and turn off the Z-add, turn on RGB intensity. And then I'm going to start out by, and sometimes you'll hear me say blowing in, and that just kind of is a tell that I used to be an airbrush guy. Sometimes you'll hear me say I'm going to blow in some color right here. So I'm going to start off with just kind of softly blowing in a little bit more darkness into some of the major depths that I can see. And it's really just kind of creating for myself this almost a pre-baked sense of shadow. It's very subtle. You don't want to do a lot of this, But I like to at least start kind of blocking in a hint of anatomical contour sometimes with this sort of darker paint. It's also a nice point in the process to sort of start getting your head together a little bit about where you're going, what kind of forms you want to accent. Because that stuff all kind of plays into the character design aspect of this quite a bit. And I'm thinking that since our initial design veered more to the soft and supple and the sexy, that with this one I'm going to go a little more aggressive. You know, like maybe this is a character also from that race, but she's more of a warrior. Because that artistically is kind of more where I tend to live at anyway. So I think that appeals to me going that route with these earthier skin tones to start out with. And I'm going to hit L on my keyboard to turn off lazy mouse on the standard brush. Sometimes lazy mouse can really get on my nerves. Sometimes it's really handy, sometimes it's really annoying. Zooming, zooming, zoom. All right. And every once in a while, I'm holding down the Shift key. You see I turned off Z-add on my smoothing, and I'll use that just to kind of smooth out some colors a bit. And I'm also going to take this as an opportunity to sort of gently give myself some guides for what kind of details I might want to bring out in this. Some forms that might be interesting to play around with. This is one of the more fun parts of doing this kind of thing, really. Pardon me. The glories of live broadcasting. You heard me sneeze. It is a wonderful sunny day here in southern Ohio, which means my allergies are just having a field day. All right, so here we're going to get kind of airbrushy with it, I think, and just start building in these hints of where things will go. And for the sake of just full transparency, guys, I really don't have a particular design in mind. I'm winging this, which is kind of fun. You know, it's a nice thing to do. It's freeing to just cut loose and do that sometimes. So, not really worried about the quality of lines or anything like that. I'm just getting kind of an attitude defined for where things are going to go. And I'm thinking she's going to have some natural like striping and things like that we'll put in there that could be really cool. Let's make that brush a little larger and kind of let that stuff live a little. Right. I'm not really worrying about having too much symmetry right now. I find that it's, I don't know. I could work towards asymmetry at this point, but right now I'm really just looking to kind of develop some style and feel my way through what she's going to be about. You know, what kind of shapes I want to work towards on the surface. So now let's, here you can see I'm kind of making this choice to follow this big form that's developed in this sculpt. And then we can let that play down into the cheeks, like so, which I think is kind of cool. And then we can let that play out and complement these big lines that we have up here. And if you're someone looking for ideas and just maybe a little bit of inspiration sometimes, I would encourage you to go look up folks doing body painting. There's a growing number of people out there who do some really cool things with body paint and airbrushing designs on bodies, on people. And it's really neat some of the stuff that I see there. One of my favorite TV shows, which I actually have not been watching this season, so don't anyone give me any spoilers, but one of my favorite TV shows is Face Off. And every once in a while, you see folks come on there who their makeup expertise is as body painters. And I'm always kind of blown away. I mean, I shouldn't say always, but oftentimes I'm really surprised and intrigued by some of the neat stuff that they come up with working without any shapes at all on the body, just with colors and the way those colors can be played with and used to create different images, or the image of different forms. Right. Yeah, that's going to be pretty cool. And see, having these lines in here this way, I feel like we immediately take this shape that here is, kind of soft and has that warmth to it, and we now are making that same concept something much more aggressive. Now, I want to follow and kind of accentuate some basic forms here, and then allow them to diverge in certain ways. So instead of following the rib cage all the way around, I'm going to let that rib, that depth right there, flow and create more of those lines. And then here we can use those to heighten the appearance of serratus. Not real sure how I feel about that one. Let's back that up a little bit. There we go. All right. And then a design element that I think will be pretty kind of cool, nifty, sweet right here would be to have this start diverging. Kind of diverge and then follow the anatomy a little bit. Maybe almost complete it. You can have some fun with that. One thing that I do want to keep in mind to kind of tie these two together is how here I have this sort of two-tone light-dark thing going on where the outsides have more color and the interior is much lighter. So at some point I'm going to go through this one and start adding more light to it. And then we can have some fun with these shapes back here. I don't want to overly corrupt the form of the buttocks. And no, I cannot say buttocks without it sounding like Forrest Gump. But the buttocks, that movie ruined me on that word. And here, maybe we'll do a little bit of ghosting right there. Okay. I do like how these lines kind of reinforce that long, lanky form. Now let's maybe diverge some of these out. Okay. That's not bad. Not bad. So that just sort of blocks us in for a lot of the pattern, a lot of the sort of the fun stuff. Going to continue down the arms with some of that line work, very similar to what we did on the feet just now. Right. And cool. All right. So there we have most of this blocked in. Let's go ahead and add a little bit more back in here. There we go. Now, having this blocked in this way is going to give us an interesting tool in that if we want to, we can use this to generate some masking that will give us an immediate way to start building up some very fast surface details. I do want to go in and darken these lips just a little bit. And probably somewhere toward the end, I'm going to end up adding a little bit more into the face and just sort of create some more attitude there that follows along with those lines that we have. I like the idea of kind of continuing these lines now that I've had a chance to kind of look at it and come around it. Okay. Yeah, Dark Seal notes you can make an awesome SSS shader using both maps. Yeah, that's something else that actually it's a thought that I've considered tossing out a few times. Not the SSS shader, but your thought that you share there brings to mind something that I've thought about a few times, but I didn't share just because I didn't want to overly confuse folks. But something that's really cool, and this is actually a good opportunity for it. Something that's really cool that you can do along the way while you're painting is if you just stop every once in a while and save out maps of where you're at, just tuck them away somewhere. Odds are they'll have a use. Like this kind of form, it's a very open, almost formless, just airbrushy sort of map. But this map, this set of maps right here, like Dark Seal said, you could use these to drive different things. Or you could save these out, save this current polypaint out as maps, take those into Photoshop and desaturate them so that they become just black and white, and then use that to drive all kinds of other effects. You could use that to drive glows on the skin, all kinds of neat stuff. I mean, it's really, I think one of the reasons I kind of stop myself from getting too deep into that sometimes is because it opens up so many possibilities that I kind of turn into a kid in a candy shop wanting to play around with all of them, and I'll eat up a lot of time talking about it. But yeah, there's a lot of cool things you can experiment with there. All right, so I'm going to pull a couple of kind of fast tricks here for generating some surface details, because part of my point today is really speed. Okay, we want to be able to get all of this done in a very short period of time. So right now we don't have any real surface detail going on at all, and if I switch over to a blend shader, you can see just how smooth that surface really is. You'll notice too that I have a handful of shaders that I switch back and forth between pretty frequently. I use the skin shader the most. Skin and blend are going to be the ones I use most of the time, although I do use flat color quite often to check things. And I keep the basic there as just kind of a counterpoint to blend that doesn't have so much specularity in it. So now let's go into our surface tab, and we'll hit the noise button there. And the first thing I'm going to do, at least I think, I don't know, I have to decide. Let's go ahead and do just a basic low-level noise across the whole figure. Oh, and in the chat, Reggie asks, "Can you do veins with this technique?" Oh yeah, there's all kinds of stuff you can do like that, man. So here, I'm going to go ahead and do some low-level noise with this. Really, just kind of trying to find something that is gonna give me just a little bit of the look that I want. Now, I can tell you that the settings in here are a bit of a liar. Like, what looks like you're getting a lot of bump in here, or excuse me, what looks like not much bumpiness in the noisemaker window, when you come out and apply it, it can look a little different. So, but this is really just to get started, and let's just pull this guy right here a little tiny bit. We'll hit OK. Make sure you turn this off, because otherwise when you apply this, it will smooth your UVs, and that is just not cool. Okay, I'm going to go back into edit one more time too, and I don't want any color blending. Okay, I just kept the color blend up so that I could see, but now I'm going to hit OK and apply to mesh, and with color blend turned off, it should just give me some surface detail. Let's turn that off. Might need to punch that strength up a little bit more. There we go. Now let's apply that. And there you can see when you actually apply it, it applies at a much lighter level than what it looks like inside the viewer. So there, now we've got a little bit of skin detail added. I'm actually really tempted to go up that other subdivision level. How the hell with it. Let's do it. Let's live a little. I'm going to unhide everything, unmask everything. We're going to subdivide one more time. 17 million polys. Woohoo. The thing that I don't like about being up that high is it can be rather taxing to show and hide meshes. That's right. Nick says I'm reckless. That's right. I'm living large, man. Living large on that high-res mesh. All right. Let's pop that bit of noise in here again at the higher resolution. It'll also take it a little bit longer to do that. Now let's open up that noise again and make some changes to it. I change the scale, and I'm going to turn that strength way down. Maybe even into the negative. I don't want to turn her into an orange peel. That's not cool. We don't want orange peel skin. Just want some subtlety. Okay, so now we'll apply that. All right. So now we've got some pretty decent porousness in the skin. They'll translate out really well into normal mapping. Now I want to spend some time building in some little details, kind of heightening a few things here and there. And most of what I'm going to do right now, at least for the moment, I'm going to be using my standard brush. I'm going to turn my RGB off and turn my Z add on. And let's turn our lazy mouse back on. I think I actually want to switch off to my pinch brush too. And this is one that you have to be careful about using. Because if you use a pinch brush, you can actually distort your mesh pretty badly. I try to use it only for certain things in certain places. Like right here, I want to really accent these lips a bit. And to do that, I want to actually pull this mesh together. Which, if you watch, it's kind of hard to see with this... with that color that it gave that poly group. But if I take my pinch brush and paint across the surface, and I have RGB turned off, you'll see that it basically tries to pinch together vertices around the edge ring that you paint over. And this can be a nice way to give more of a delineated feel to something. So like right here, I wanted to really get those lips to tighten up a bit. And let's say we tighten up the nose a little bit. And this is stuff that I will save and send back over to DS as a morph that sits on top of the Alien Allure morph. Maybe we'll call this one Alien Aggressive. Alien Aggressive and Alien Allure. I kind of like that. So I just wanted to tighten those a little bit and show you guys how you can do that. Let's switch back off to the standard brush. And here I'm holding the Alt key to set it to sub. And, oh, I did not mean to do that. If you're holding the Alt key and you click on anything up here, it'll try to send its menu over to the side. So let's go into our standard tool. And let's change that Z intensity a little bit. It's probably a bit much. And we are going with, you know, and this is Alien Aggressive. I'm going to keep that name. I like that. So I'm going to use this as an opportunity to sculpt out some details that will play well to that concept. And you'll notice that I'm keeping it mostly on my blend material while I sculpt these, because the blend material's specularity makes it much easier for me to see what I'm sculpting, you know, to see surface changes. We're not going to do a ton of sculpting with this because it's already building on top of the character that we have. I just want to do enough that it adds some little subtleties that kind of break it away from our existing concept. Right here is a little thing that I think people need to pay more attention to, is the corners of mouths are such a little trouble spot. And it's so easy for that to be one of the most fake looking areas in 3D. because a lot of times people don't want to put any amount of weight there because they're afraid that it'll make things look old or whatever. I'm probably putting too much there right now because it's on my mind, but still, just a little. Oh, there we go. Just a little tiny bit of weight into that, and maybe pinching it together just a bit helps give it a more natural feeling around that area. Oh, later, Dark Seal. Looks like he had to step out. Said he had to go eat. Fun. All right. And let's go ahead and take our standard brush, come back through and block in a few more small little sort of character-related alterations. So she's going to be more aggressive, so let's make the cheekbones a little more pronounced. Maybe a little harder. And I'm going to do these. You notice I'm working at lower subdivision levels for these. There's a lot of reasons for that. One, if I want to smooth some of the forms out at the lower subdivisions, it'll keep the higher subdivisions smaller, more granular sorts of details in place. And also, it's going to perform faster. It's going to work faster under my brush. So now let's just come through here and maybe heighten a little bit of this. And I definitely want her to be of the same race, but maybe engineered for something a little different. So we're going to heighten a lot of those more aggressive aspects of the character. So there, if we pop back and forth and look, you can see here's our original. She's soft and supple. And here's where we are now. All right. Another brush that I will use from time to time at this stage in things is my clay buildup. Let's turn up the focal shift on it so we soften it. It's going to have a squarish nature to it because that has a square alpha in it. But I like it for doing broad strokes and kind of tweaking in forms a little bit. I think it's very easy with the amount of detail we can plug into things. It's very easy to fixate so much on the small details that we ignore large forms. But large forms actually define a lot more of character than the small forms do sometimes. So you want to make sure you give that stuff plenty of love. One of the things I like about the way this brush works is you can see there we start to pull out these interesting lines just in the way that it lays form down. And that can be very useful. So on this one, since she's more aggressive, I'm gonna six-pack her a little bit. Just kind of follow this stuff around. All right. She's like the fitness competition cousin of our alien lure chick. This is alien allure on CrossFit. There we go. Let's bring out those back spines a little bit more on this one. I like that shape right there. That's kind of nice. All right. Now let's accent some musculature. I like to add a little bit of, or subtract a little bit of volume from the underarms. I find that that area, I think that the Genesis figure would have benefited from having just a little more volume removed up under that area. That's just me. And let's grab, where's my damn standard? Where's my damn standard? There's my damn standard. Yay, damn standard. Damn standard to the rescue. Just use that to kind of bring out some form, a little bit of subtractive sculpting here. Let's turn that down to about half the value it had. Okay. So, again, you can tell this is the same race, but a very, very different concept. Right. Let's go through and pull out a little bit more anatomy. Let's go up a subdivision as we start to define more of this stuff. Give just a little bit of striation in some areas because she's a high-tone girl. High-toned and well-trained. It's funny, you would think doing anatomical type stuff, you'd end up doing the same thing over and over. And you do, but then again, you don't. Like, it's the same major forms, but within those forms, you start to find ways that you can develop kinds of form language that will tell bits of story and give you, all kinds of neat design aspects. And it's kind of funny how that works. Inventive anatomy is a fun thing. It's something I enjoy quite a bit. So now let's just kind of follow some of those painted forms. Here you can see, we haven't even used any of that poly paint yet to generate any shape, which eventually I'm going to use it to add some shaping on top of all of this. Everything that we've done so far has just been some broad brushed colors. Really one color and then some shadows or just some darker tones. And then coming in with some very basic sculpting. Part of the point that I wanted to get across with this is actually just how easy it can be to do really cool, inventive sorts of characters. And it's nice because everyone has an alien idea. Everyone has some idea that they could convey as a cool alien concept. And just the permutations of it mean that it never really gets old. Like you can do inventive alien stuff from now on. And I think that attributes a lot, or that is what I attribute a lot of the popularity of science fiction and the growing popularity of science fiction to, is just the creativity level of it. You're not bound. It's kind of funny. Like I enjoy fantasy as much as any other dork does. I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan. I love Dungeons and Dragons. I love all that kind of stuff. And I have a lot of fun doing my own fantasy stuff. But the thing that I find with sci-fi and coming up with aliens is that with medieval fantasy, and that's really what all that is. It's all inspired by, medieval sort of Wagnerian kind of fantasy. When you work with that, there's a language to it that you have to stick with, or you're not working with it really. You can do a lot within that language, but you still have to stick with it. The interesting thing about sci-fi and aliens is that it can pull from that, because in a sci-fi world, sci-fi setting, you can have your characters going to primitive places. So in those primitive places, you can have those medieval concepts. You can have things that look like they walked out of the Lord of the Rings. And you can have those things meeting guys like Space Marines, that, carrying, blasters and whatever. That also means that you're not bound by some of the tropes of fantasy creature creation. And so you can do a lot of things that are just kind of that would be much harder to sell in the typical fantasy sort of realm. So that being the case, I think that's why, like as vendors, as artists and content artists in this market, science fiction is a consistent high seller. Sci-fi stuff just consistently does well. As a genre, it outperforms pretty much everything else. And so I would say that kind of speaks to a lot of what I was just talking about. And it also tells me that as artists creating this kind of content, that's a bottomless well that we can go to. Now, granted, you have to stay relevant. You have to stay creative. If you repeat yourself too much, people will be like, yeah, this guy's already done that creature. He's already done that design, blah, blah, blah. So you can't keep repeating yourself with it. But if you just keep fresh, keep pushing the envelope, coming up with new ideas, new approaches to things, which, I mean, that's part of the fun of this stuff anyway. I mean, why would you want to do the same thing over and over? That's silly to me. When you keep doing that kind of new stuff and you allow, the freedom of the genre to sort of express itself in what you'll do, then your work's going to stay fresh. Your audience is going to keep coming back for it, and you're going to succeed. And it's awesome that way. I think that's one of the things that keeps me doing this stuff in general. All right. So here, I really like how this has kind of grown into a set of shapes that are really pretty interesting. This is a fun little exercise for me anyway, because, just as I was saying, keep it fresh. Like, I don't do that many character kits based on a human form, and I just don't do that many. I really prefer doing all original creatures, where I'm actually modeling all of it from the ground up. And the reason I prefer it is just because working on a human chassis like this has limitations. I mean, there's lots of cool things we can do inside Daz Studio, lots of cool things we can do with Genesis that push the envelope on those limitations, but it still has limitations. So I tend to enjoy myself more when I'm working on, big crazy critters and just neat original concept stuff. Like completely original sorts of creatures. But this is a nice change of pace for me in that, because there's a certain design challenge that comes, and it's like, okay, well, it's a human figure, so I've already got certain constraints. How do I make something cool within those constraints? All right, let's zoom out. Sometimes it's easy to get kind of fixated and go granular. And you got to zoom out every once in a while to kind of see where your forms are leading. All right. Again, just kind of applying some basic anatomical sculpting to heighten her sense of strength. I'm not going to overdo it because she is still kind of a soft race. Here's an area that gets kind of glossed over a lot is in alien and creature design is in the hands. You really need to go through and add these kind of folds into the hands. It's one of those little telltale things that when I look at somebody's work and I don't see those things, it's like, oh man, come on, you know, what were you doing? You gotta step that up. Of course, at this point, I'm going to go up another subdivision level because we do need that extra resolution to add this stuff in. And this is also a good point where I'd like to note that it's like a lot of folks who watch these, and a lot of folks who are into this in the content market. I know there's a lot of people who are coming into this from a hobbyist standpoint and as hobbyists. And that is a cool thing. That is a great thing. I love what that offers folks. But I would encourage you guys to look up some art outside of the content world. Look up art and resources outside of this, because those are things. If you're into Daz Studio as a hobby and rendering as a hobby, and you spend a lot of time with that hobby, that's cool. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not downing that. What you can run into though is this thing where you've looked at that stuff so much that it becomes all you see. And then when you create something, it becomes all you create. So, and there are a lot of little issues that happen in the course of this field. So I would encourage you to go look up, there's a lot of classic sort of, like I am a comic book guy. I go to comics for a lot of things, and comic book artists are my probably biggest inspiration. And I would encourage looking up, in particular, a guy named Bernie Hogarth for his anatomy work. And even if you don't check out his comics, he's a guy from the 1940s. If you look up Hogarth's Dynamic Anatomy, or his dynamic series of books, there's Dynamic Anatomy, Dynamic Light and Shade, Dynamic Figure Drawing, all this stuff. Hogarth's work will really teach you anatomy. In my opinion, it teaches anatomy. Probably the only other anatomy resource out there I think is remotely comparable is from the guy who taught him, a guy named George Bridgman. But the point being, I think a lot of times there's an assumption without well, people don't even really think it through, where they're like, oh, I've got this figure. Well, I don't have to worry about this. I can just add details on top of it. Well, yes and no. You really want to have a sense of anatomy, and it's very easy to use bad sculpting to break the anatomy that's there, or to create anatomy that doesn't make sense, or to completely miss little details, anatomical details, like something like this, like the little folds around knuckles, little things in the hands, stuff like that. It's very easy to let some of the upshot of what we have here with these pre-made figures and all this technology. It's very easy to let that kind of distract you from some very important basics that that I find are kind of what set people apart making this stuff. All right. So now that I've gone on one of my little rants about that sort of thing, not really ranting, it's just something that I notice, you know. Let's come back through and we'll add A little bit of compression, some wrinkles around this area. Oh, wow. I missed my hour break. You can always tell the stuff that I have the most fun doing because that hour just slips by and I don't even notice it. All right. So now let's come back around, and every once in a while I can turn on my wireframe and it gives me kind of a landmark for where the anatomy was built in the original figure. So there I can see where my major surface for the elbow falls. And then that gives me a visual cue that I can use to inform my own sculpting from there, which is pretty gosh darned handy. All right. And nice, nice, nice. Yeah, I'm really digging what we've got going on there. I'm going to make my damn standard brush a little larger, come down through and do just some broad strokes, sort of accenting things down the legs a bit. Maybe turn the intensity down on that just a touch. Really heighten that crease back here from the hamstrings. I'm going to turn that fill on for a moment so that I can see past what I painted, because like I could see right there where some of these lines that I painted in were actually kind of playing tricks on my eyes. And I'm feeling pretty good about that. All right. So that's going to wrap up pretty much everything I think I want to do for the for my surface enhancements there. We might come through and do a little, let's give her some nippage. And we'll just kind of, subtle, all right? It's a warm planet. She doesn't need to have headlights going on here. Just a little bit going on with that. And let's throw a little bit of color. Just a tiny bit of color around the area there, just to kind of demark it. Okay. And so there you have just two colors and a surface sculpt. I'm going to take a short break. I'm kind of a half hour past my usual break. I'm going to take a short break, grab myself some coffee. You guys, as is the usual protocol, stretch your legs, talk amongst yourselves for a minute. If you have any questions, be sure to pop them into the chat. And when I come back, I'm going to finish out this paint, send the morph over to DS, and then save out my textures, and that will have us in right around the 2-hour mark, having created a whole new sculpt on top of an existing sculpt, and a whole new set of textures that will play well with what we have in the Alien Lure kit. So I will be back in just a moment. And I am back, coffee in hand, rejuvenated, and ready to finish this baby out. Let's take a quick look back through the chat, as per standard operating procedure, and see if we have any interesting comments, conversations going on. Let's see. Russ Barrett, acknowledging that Dynamic Anatomy is an awesome book. Dude, I have been through, no joke, I'm on, I think it's my 5th or 6th copy of Dynamic Anatomy that I have gone through in my life, where I've just worn every single one out studying his work. Bernie Hogarth, Dynamic Anatomy, it is your Bible. Not Gray's, not any, no. The Bible of... Well, okay, the New Testament of anatomy is Bernie Hogarth. The Old Testament would be George Bridgman, his teacher. So there you go. OT-NT. George Bridgman, Bernie Hogarth, get the books. Just done. Get the books. Like, I've gotten so when I'm talking to people about comics, like if I'm at a comic show and young dudes come up and they're like, hey, I want to blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, well, first off, what are you studying for anatomy? If they don't say Bernie Hogarth or George Bridgman, I'm like, okay, you need to go find these. Let's talk again after you've read Bernie Hogarth. Okay, sometimes I just, especially if I'm in a foul mood, I'll try to be polite, but I don't even want to like get too deep into it if they haven't studied one of those two guys, because they're just so fundamental. I had a kid intern in our studio a few years ago from a very prominent art and design program from a university nearby. And in their program, they did not have mention of Hogarth or Bridgman. I'm like, this is a freaking travesty. What are you paying for, man? This is ridiculous, Yeah, I get on a real soapbox about that. I'm like, this is mandatory stuff. And it's funny to me, too, in the broader world of art, how few people actually dig in on Hogarth and Bridgman. But inside comics, everybody they know. Like, people in comics know Hogarth and Bridgman. You got to have them. All right. All right, so I've had a slurp or two of coffee, checked the chat, kind of up to date on where everybody's at. That rhymed. It's fully unintentional, but always amuses me. Now, let's have a little bit more fun. Let's take all that cool painting that we've done and use that to drive a number of different things that'll play into our textures and a little bit more surface detail. So I'm going to turn on my polyframe, turn off the lines, turn on fill. Let's go down to a lower sub D, sub deedly doodly. And I only want this mesh visible right now. All the other stuff can go away. Go bye-bye. Bye-bye. Y'all can just be hidden. Now I'm going to crank my subdivisions back up. It's nice to be able to look at this stuff with the fill turned on, because you can see things about the surfacing, that you might want to catch. Actually, at this point, I do want to add a little bit of detail to the lips. So let's take a standard brush. Let's go into our alpha. Let's pull up alpha. Which one is that? Alpha 6D. And I'm going to take my Z add. Let's turn off our lazy mouse. I hit L on my keyboard to do that. Might want to have a little bit more of that Z add. And so here we can get some of that. I don't know what to call that kind of textural thing that happens in lips, but it's important to have that. And I find that if you have that sculpted in and it picks up nicely in your normal mapping, then a lot of times I see folks quite often baking in specularity and things into lips when they really didn't need to. Like, you could just have pure color, and if your normal map has good sculpting in it, it's going to pick up light and it's going to be more natural. Before I get into that little this little technique I was going to do with that color that's already there, I also want to add some little details around the eyes. I want to make the eyelids just a touch heavier. I'm using an inflate brush to do that. And then after I add that little bit of volume, I will take a dam standard brush and let's turn our Z sub back up on that a little bit. And I just want to add some little things in here that will help kind of define those eyes. All right. Don't want to go overboard with wrinkles on this because I want her to still be able to be at least somewhat attractive. You know, not that wrinkles aren't necessarily attractive. I'm sure they can be, but I don't want to have her so aggressive that she loses her sensuality. All right. Let's give a little bit more definition around the nostrils. We call him Nostradamus because he could smell the future. I can hear the groaning already. That's okay. It was meant for a groan. Right. And now we can move on with that little technique that I was looking at. So if we turn off our polyframe, you can see, or if we actually just go to flat color, you can see very clearly what we have painted in there right now. I'm going to turn my polyframe back on with lines turned off and fill turned on. And then let's go over to our masking. And if I go down to mask by color and I hit mask by intensity, you'll see that it creates masking based on the darker areas of color. That is incredibly handy on so many levels. With that in place, there you can see turning that off and back on. There are a lot of things that we can do with that. The first thing I want to do is let's turn back onto a blend material. I'm also going to alter that material slightly just so that it shows up a little more clearly. Let's turn the ambience up and turn up my diffuse just so it's a little brighter, but we still have all that nice specularity showing. So now let's go back into our surface tab from earlier, and we'll go into edit, and now anything that is masked will control where the effect falls. So if we were to turn up the strength now, okay. Of course, our mask is kind of light, so let's turn that up to something rather extreme for the moment, and just hit OK. Now let's sharpen our mask a couple times. And suddenly, she belongs in a black metal band. That amused me. I'm sorry. kind of interesting, actually, just letting things pull these random sort of patterns out from what you've painted. And there's a lot of creative potential in that. You know, if I were doing this to be a larger sort of kit, I might go ahead and save a copy of this as it is and toss that out as a set of maps that we could use, you know, because it's got a cool look to it. It's got some really neat stuff going on, actually. It's not quite what I want at the moment, though. Where I want to go with this is going to be a little less death metal, a little more sea creature. So there, I just softened that mask a bit, and now you'll see it, the effect of our noise transitions. So let's blur that mask again. And all I'm looking to do right now is judge where my masking is going to fall, or where my noise is going to fall. And then I'm going to go back into my noise maker. And let's change this over to noise plug. And the noise plug will let us use all kinds of different patterns. So I'm just going to switch off to something really lame for the moment, like let's switch off to checkerboard, just so it's something I can see. At first, you might not be able to see the results very clearly. So I'm going to turn Mix Basic Noise off. And now I'm going to play around with my plug-in scale. I'm going to turn my color blend back up a little bit, because again, that's going to help me see those results as they project onto the surface. Now let's edit that. And I'm using this because I want to have some kind of a sort of natural pattern. So let's do Perlin Noise. Oh, there's so many things that you can play with in here. I mean, you can get lost just playing with Noisemaker. Of course, some of it is incredibly lame. Oh, I like this one. I kind of figured this is the one I would land on, was Voronoi. Okay. And so from here, I can also judge what kind of changes this is going to make to my color. So let's say we want to add some. What color do we want to add into this? Maybe. Yeah, we want strength by mask all the way up so that our mask fully controls this. And then you can also change the color blending mode. Let's see. There we go. If you turn on just a tiny little bit of Mix Basic Noise, then we can change our color blend mode. So let's see, we had that. We want to go. How about that? I think that has some potential. There we go. I kind of dig that. I think that's a keeper. So now I have color and some surfacing going on from my plug-in here. I'm going to turn up that strength just a tiny little bit. That way we get a little bit more of that crinkling in the surface. And we could also play around. Here we go. I like that. I wanted to create something that has, I don't want to go completely reptile, but I wanted something that just feels a little more worn. So now let's go with that. And we'll hit apply to mesh. And now that is fully baked in. So now let's create a counter to that by inverting our mask. We'll bring up our noise again. This time, let's go into Edit. And we're going to choose a different color. I want to keep it in the same value range right here, but maybe move it around the spectrum a little. We could kind of draw it back towards our original design by moving over towards this pinkishness, but I think I want to keep it kind of a cool blue. Okay. And then let's keep the same pattern, but make it a little larger. There we go. And let's turn off masking for a moment so we can look at that without the corruption of that darkness of the mask kind of, you know, playing tricks on us. So there's what we have at the moment. I think I'm going to keep that. Let's apply it. And you notice I am keeping that masking in place no matter what. That masking is my friend. And so with that masking continuing to be in place, I can now take my standard brush, go back to RGB, and now we can enhance the color for this a little bit. Let's drag our color. If you click on your color selector and you just drag, then whatever your mouse stops on, it'll grab that color. So I want to grab a little bit of that brownishness that's in there and maybe pull that down a little. And then let's go into our brush settings. And this is a way that we can have two different kinds of masking going at once. Okay, right now we have masking turned on the surface. And then I'm going to have some masking that's just in the brush itself. So I'll go into auto masking and I'm going to turn on cavity mask. If we open that up, we can also control the curve. And I'm going to crank that all the way up. So now, if I were to paint with this, you'll see that it's just going to paint across the raised mesh. If we take it the opposite direction, it's going to flood into the depths. It's a very handy trick. Then the other thing that I want to do is go down to my alpha and texture, and I'm going to change the polypaint mode of my brush to multiply. And that's number 3 on there. And so that is going to allow me to kind of blow in some color that's going to pick up subsurface sort of details, some of those micro details. Now it's darkening around those eyes a bit. I like to use the eye socket as an area to really go nuts with that darkness, mostly because it gives me a visual reference for how dark I'm going. That way I can go, oh yeah, you know, that's kind of the maximum right there. So now you can see it's only painting, you know, wherever we don't have masking turned on. And so I can kind of go around that and just pick and choose little areas. So I'm not 100% flooding it with color based on that mask shape, but I am dropping in this kind of darkness and just sort of blowing it in, letting it pick up from that masking. So it's acting on both what is sculpted into the surface and what is masked. So then we can do a lot more subtleties with it than if we just flooded it. And then I can just kind of walk through some broad strokes around the figure now. Let's go back to our skin shade. We'll go back to blend. I'm really kind of liking looking at it with that blend on there right now. So I like the complexity of color that we can get from this method, where we start with some noise and then we come back through and paint in some things. Right. Now let's invert our masking. We'll hide it again. And I think I want to delineate some of this a bit more. It's hard to say. It's really, really hard to say. Man. Decisions. So let's go look at maybe going through these yellow areas and adding kind of an orange around some of this. That's probably a bit too bright. It's very easy at this point to end up turning your colors to mud. So discretion is important. Don't overdo it. It's very easy to end up overworking. I see a lot of stuff out there. Well, I don't see a lot. I see some stuff out there that could be great work if people didn't just overwork their textures. And I've been guilty of overworking my textures sometimes. You know, I can look back at it and I'm like, oh my God, what was I thinking? But yeah, overworking your textures actually can really kill a design, because you'll end up turning it to mud, thinking that you've got great details everywhere, when really all you did was just kind of blast it with so much color that it ends up not having room to breathe. And that's a hard thing. I mean, it's also a subjective thing too. So, you know, what seems overworked to me may not seem overworked to somebody else. But it's something that takes a little bit of time. I think you just have to play around with it and find what works for you. You know, like right here, I'm letting my shapes kind of inform where I blow these colors in at. I'm just using this as an opportunity to sort of enhance the impression of anatomy. Let's just walk our way on back out through there. Come back under here a bit. Okay. You know, I almost want to go more extreme with that pattern because I really dig that patterning. Let's invert that. And I almost want to go bluer with it. Let's maybe go to a kind of a blue-green and just see what we get. I kind of dig that. This is also one of the fun parts because you get to kind of play around with the colors and see how they're going to work out together. Yeah, I still want that to go a little darker. I'm very cautious about how dark I'm willing to go. But I'm really thinking, after looking at that masking more and more, that I want to bring that pattern out. So I like those lines. I like where that takes me kind of story-wise. I feel like that has a character to it. All right. And let's just paint a little bit more in here, a little bit more in here. And of course, once I clear that masking off, unfortunately, since this is a multi, since we have multiple UDM tiles on this, if I clear that masking off now, I'm not going to be able to get that back, at least not very easily. What I could do is make a copy of this. And I think I'm going to do this, actually. It's kind of an interesting little sidebar technique right here, where I still have all that masking on. I'm duplicating this subtool because I want to keep a copy of that around with that masking intact. And really, I want to be able to call that masking back up as maps later if I wanted. You know, like if I wanted to use it again. So here in a copy, where our masking is still on, I'm going to flood black, then invert, and flood white. And she's back to being in a death metal band. But anyway, black metal band. But the thing that will allow me to do is I could use multi-map export to spit out maps of these colors, and then I could reload those in and make masks from them if I want. And that would let me do that across all those UDM tiles. It's a much more advanced sort of technique for saving masking, and it's something that you have to do sometimes when you know you want to save a specific set of masking on something that uses multi-UDM tiles. Now that I have that, though, I can clear my masking, and we can finish out my painting and surfacing. I want to go back through and soften some things up now. So let's hold shift. Yeah, the bomb's going off over here. Let's hold shift, and I'm going to turn RGB kind of down on my smoothing. Turn Z-add down on my smoothing. Let's crank up the focal shift. And so here's where we're going to be able to dial some of this back. So I want to come back through here and smooth out some of this stuff. Just a little bit. Then I want to come back through and pull out some details from the sculpting, but I want to pull out larger details, some big depths. So let's go to a lower subdiv. I'll go to my masking, and let's do mask by cavity. Now maybe let's blur that, sharpen it. Sometimes you can alternate back and forth between blurring and sharpening, and you'll be able to pick up the depths. All right. And I'm going to turn that cavity masking back off. Let's come back up to our highest subdiv. Give that just a moment. Come on. There we go. So I want to add another color, something a little more complementary here. Let's go with some blue. Turn this down a bit. Turn my polypaint mode to multiply. So here I'm going to go in and really bring out a lot of that sculpting. So I wanted this to be more of a warrior version of this particular alien concept. And I think that this gives a much rougher sort of look. You know, we have Miss Sexy Thing over here. If it'll switch, thank you. You know, we have Miss Sexy Thing over here. So this is, you know, this is her angry militant cousin. Alright. Just let that kind of connect and bring it all together. Right now I'm hitting it with this blue through my depths. That's going to get that started. It's going to enhance that anatomy a bit. And just blow in a little bit around the fingers. If Zbrush will frame this, that'd be nice. There we go. Thank you, Zbrush. All right, and now I'm going to clear off my masking. And we're going to go really large with the brush, really small with the focal shift. And we're going to get kind of airbrushy here with it. Just kind of bringing this all sort of together with some soft kind of transitional tones. If we switch over to a skin shader, of course the skin shader also, I think I want to turn my ambient up and my diffuse. So now we can see where we're headed with this. I'm liking it. And I also want to go over this with a bit of a spray. That way we randomize some of the color that gets dropped. And I find that that helps really tighten things up, especially when you have high contrast color palette like that. Sometimes you need to kind of knock that back a bit. So, like I said, I know I was in danger of overworking this. And I probably did overwork it just a little bit in some areas. But for the kind of concept I had in mind, I'm okay with it. I'm actually pretty happy with it. So, here you can see similar technique to what I used in the original pink version of this concept, or of the Alien Allure concept. Here I'm just kind of using an alpha to go back through and add a little bit more breakup. So there's an alpha and a spray. And I'll go large with that, and you'll see how that adds that kind of mottling. So I'm going to come back down the sides on this with a similar kind of modeling that I have on the original pink version. And kind of like how that pink one, the original Alien Allure in pink, has that lighter, almost white sort of belly. I'm going to keep this one more of a yellow tone down the middle. Frame. Come on, Zbrush. Frame it up. Frame it up. Zbrush is hanging on me. That's not cool. There we go. So there you can see how we're starting to get that two-tone sort of design. That kind of keeps with the sort of my design concept for the species. I don't want to lose all my nice patterning. I want that to still be there, just maybe a little more subtle. All right. And then the last thing I'm going to do here is select my yellow from down in the middle. I want kind of that warmer yellow. And I'm also going to change my brush, my polypaint mode, to number 4. That's lighten. And I'm going to come back through and kind of lighten the center of this. And again, just blowing that in over top of all this is really going to help bring it all together. This is also a good time to look at this in flat color mode, where I'm not letting the geometry have an effect on things, so then I can really see what I've got as far as actual just straight pure color with no geometry involvement. Okay. I don't want to let myself get sucked into running around the back of this with that lighter color. I want to keep the light stuff in the front so that it kind of follows a similar design concept as our original. Alright, and let's show those legs a little love down in here. Maybe the hands too. There we go. I know I get a little bit quiet on this part, but this is the fun stuff is usually when we get the most quiet. All right, let's kind of pull that all back together. Of course, the amount of bumpiness that we see inside ZBrush can be dialed down when we take it over to DS. I would rather have a little bit more bump in here and dial it back later. So let's take, I think the very last thing, I think I've said the last thing a couple times, but the last thing I want to do really and truly, really and for true, is take a darker color in my damn standard brush, turn on RGB with it, and let's go through and heighten. Also need to make sure I change my brush mode. Let's put that back to multiply. And so I want to kind of heighten some of these lines around the eyes a bit. Okay. And then let's change back to our standard brush. And, whoop, a little too much there. Take it down to a pretty low value. I'm just going to kind of restate some of the depths on this. So that we really focus the attention back on the eyes and on some of the major forms. There we go. All right. And I feel pretty comfortable with that. So at this point, I'm going to go down to my lowest subdivision. Give it a minute. I'm going to go down to the lowest sub D whenever it catches up. And I'm just going through the subdivisions right now just so I can more easily hide and show things. And once I've shown that inner mouth and the eyes and all that, I'll go back to my highest subdivision. I'm going to flood those with black just because, actually I think I'll flood those with something really bright so that when I create the maps and it spits out maps for those, these will be maps that I don't need. And so I'm just going to flood them with a bright color to denote for myself that these are unnecessary. That way when I see that bright color in the directory that they'll save to, I'll know just to delete those, because I only want to use the skin maps for this. I'm going to reuse the inner mouth and eyes from the original piece. Yeah, there was a question in the chat about what subdivision I was at. I'm not sure at what point in my work that the question was posed at, but right now I'm going back to a subdiv 6. And let's save this, because I haven't saved this entire time. And you guys have watched me enough to know how bad I can be about that. Fortunately, Zbrush quick saves, which is pretty awesome. So I'm going to save this in here as Alien Aggro. And I am running a bit over on time today. Hopefully this won't take too long to spit out the maps. If it saves these maps out quickly, then we can pop this over into DS and get the job done without having to break or do another video. Okay, so that's saving. Give that just a minute. There we go. And now, before I save out my maps, I think I want to go ahead and send this shape over to DS. So I've gone down to my lowest subdivision. You don't really have to, but... And now let's Control G. We'll send this over. This is kind of the beauty, or part of the beauty of what I wanted to show you guys today, was going through an entire sculpt and texture all in one sitting. So now let's accept that. And we're going to call that Alien Aggro. We hit accept. Let's give that just a moment. Let's switch this back over to iRay for the moment. And then we'll apply that morph, and you'll see what that morph looks like through these original textures. So there you can see how that sculpted shape translates over. Plays really well with our original. Let's just do a couple quick parameter changes on this. We want the default to be 0. We turn that up there, you can see what that does. I like that quite a bit. So I'm going to turn iRay back off just so it's not eating up resources. Now let's pop back over to ZBrush. Let's go into our plugins. We'll go to Multi-Map Exporter. And I want displacement, normal, texture. I don't really need ambient occlusion or cavity. Not for this, not for the way that I want this to work. Okay. And so I'm going to hit Create All Maps. And I'm putting these in a dev folder because I'm going to convert them all to JPEGs eventually, and Multi-Map Exporter doesn't save out JPEGs. So and we'll hit save, and we'll let that chug for a minute. This may take a couple minutes, but I'm going to stay on and check the chat while this is working. Hopefully it's not going to hit my machine so hard that it screws up the feed here. So let's see. Let's take a look back over in the chat for a minute while this bakes. I see Mike Keown earlier said so much for sensuality. Well, you know, Mike, some folks might find a more aggressive alien rather sensual. I veer toward the aggressive, man. It's just what I do. I know what my own artistic penchants tend to be, and I'm okay with them. Let's see. Now is a good time. If you guys have any questions or comments, because I'm actually glued to the chat while this is baking. So if you guys have any questions or comments you want to fire off, right now is a great time for that. Let's see. Nick Silver called her zebra bitch. That's, well, it's rather harsh of you, Mr. Nick. Yeah, I think the end results of this will be pretty sweet. There's definitely a bit of a disparity between what you'll get working in ZBrush and what you get when you apply it all inside iRay or inside DS. And that's something you kind of develop a feel for. I wish that ZBrush had iRay or some kind of PBR renderer built into it so that we could gauge that stuff on the fly right there. But it's not far enough apart from the end result that I think it causes any real problems. And then on top of that, if you really, 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 really wanted to, you could take all of that work into Substance, if you have it, and make little tweaks and things there that are pretty cool. So the primary reason that you guys don't see me doing just texture painting, like character texture stuff in Substance top to bottom, at least not on the Genesis figures, is because where they use multi-UDIM tiles, the single biggest drawback of Substance. And I'm just like, dear God, algorithmic, please fix this. Like now, like yesterday. This should have been fixed before this program ever went prime time. Substance can't paint seamlessly across UDIM tiles. That is the only flaw I find in that program, really. I mean, there's little things I'd love to see change, but that makes it very difficult. Now, when I do things like clothing, when I have any kind of models that use a single texture space, I'll use Substance all day long for that. What this baking process is, Reggie had a question about the baking process. What this is, I mean, it's nicknamed baking. What it's doing right now is comparing the lowest resolution of the mesh to the highest resolution of the mesh, and it's doing it in each of the different UDIM tiles and then it's saving out the normal map and displacement maps based on the vertex and normal differences in those. And then it's looking at the polypaint in the highest resolution and saving out maps for each UDIM tile from that. So that's really what's going on when you use multi-map exporter. I like using that because it just saves me time. Like, I can hit one button and it's going to rifle through all those UDIM tiles. Whereas, you know, sometimes I might manually save these out, manually bake them and save them out, but it just doesn't, I don't know. I just don't really like having to sit and babysit it that long. Basically, everything it's doing here is like a scripted version of what you'll find if you follow my mouse over here, over in the texture map, displacement map, and normal map tabs. It's doing the exact same things that come about through those tabs. It's just, it knows to do them by UDIM tile. So it looks like it's probably getting close to finished. I know this is just a completely magical part of the process. I feel like I should have some kind of lobby music to turn on when I'm waiting for something like this on the live feed. Do 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 do. Oh yeah, yeah. This is usually the part of the process where I get up and like go run around the block with my dogs, or go do something physical for a little bit. There are enough things like this that happen during the course of my usual work day that, it's like, oh look, I have to wait on this program to bake something. Well, let's go do some sit-ups. let's go run these dogs somewhere. Let's go do something. But not today, because I'm hanging with you guys. We're hanging. We're chilling. Chilling and waiting on this to bake. See, Loki got to go have a break. I might actually step away here in a second and grab some more coffee. I don't know. I'm tempted. Shake and bake, baby. Shake and bake. Yeah, this is definitely the process intensive part of the game. This is when Zbrush goes, ugh. Nick Silver, you're in Montreal right now instead of England. Huh. Interesting. What brings you across the pond, my friend? Crossing the pond. Oh, you're here with Miss V. Nifty. Like with is in Montreal. You guys are both in Montreal, or like you guys know each other or something. That's super cool. I don't want to pry though, but that's really cool. All right, so yeah, it took 8.5 minutes to spit that stuff out. That could have been worse. So now we have our mappage. Yay! Mappage has been saved. Yes. So we can switch back over to DS now, and I want to save this before I go. Save. Save a doodle doo. Save a doodle doo. All right. And so I am basically done in ZBrush now. So we can just close that bad boy out. I want to... Oh, and I had this stuff kind of queued up to show you guys the promos on the Alien Creation Kit. Pretty nifty little doodad there. Also showing off some of the different clothing that's available at CGBytes. Some Triplonia stuff, some Dark Void stuff. All good, all works on her. So there you go, shameless plug for CGB. Reggie asked about the masking that I saved out earlier. If you can use that to make geo... what are those? Geo shells. He said geospheres. It's geo shells. Yeah, I mean, you could totally take that masking and save out a geo shell, like turn on a geo shell and use that masking, if I saved it out as maps, to control all kinds of neat stuff on those geo shells. And that's not a bad idea. I might even do that. So let's just... Here you'll see why I always have a dev folder saved in with my libraries. That allows me to, just from inside DS, I can browse to folder location and find my work very easily. Yay! And then I have a little utility here that I use. Since this saves everything out as... Since Multimap Exporter saves everything out as TIFFs, I need to convert it. I also want to take a look real quick. I know that the eyelashes and eye maps and the mouth map I don't need. And here I had them. You can see how easily I could find them by having them flood with red. So I'm just going to delete those. Let's crank our preview up a little larger. There's the mouth, lashes, and both eyes. So I don't need those. So now I'm down to just the maps that I need. And I need to convert those to JPEGs. So I have a little app on here called ABIC, that you can download, I think, from CNET. And it's just a bulk converter. So I'll select all these, put my compression level all the way up as high as it goes, like to 99, that way our quality is at the highest. Hit convert, give that a second. All right. And now that that is finished, we now have JPEGs of everything. And let's just group by type. And I can grab all those TIFFs that are so huge, and they can go hasta la bye-bye. So now we're down to just the JPEGs we need. And I'm going to move a copy of those into my runtime, textures, CGBytes folder under Alien Aggro. We'll just paste those in. And also Zbrush adds this little string of numbers into all of your displacement maps when it saves those out. So I want to just pull that out. That way everything reads the same and it's easier for me to keep track of it and know exactly what I'm grabbing. Okay. And in theory, I could even have those named. Yeah, they're named the same as here. So these are Alien Allure, right? And I could take the matte files for those and do a find and replace on them in a text editor and just change the everything that says alien allure -dm -u0 underscore v0, I could find and replace those and generate some pretty solid materials for this. And I think I'm going to do that because that's probably going to be faster for me than doing this manually. So let's browse to that folder and let's just copy and paste. And then this one's going to be Alien Aggro Default Matte. And I'll open that up in Yonder Text Editor. And then I want to keep this window up so I can see these. Okay. So we need to take everything that says this is potentially tricky stuff here, so just bear with me. So let's do a search for underscore U0 underscore V0 underscore V0. So underscore U0 underscore V0. And I just want to make sure that I do these in order that I can visually, that I can see them over here in my Explorer window. So let's grab this little bit of text right here. And whoop, there we go. And then I'll grab this from here, just paste it in. So we're going to replace all of, oh, nope, wrong one. We want to replace all of this one like this. So we're replacing Alien Allure with the Aggro. Actually, you know what? I need to not do it that way because the paths are probably going to be wrong on there. I can fix that too, though. So let's replace all of these. So there's 8 of those. Then we're going to do the depth map on each of those. Should be 8. And now let's do the normal map for that. And we got 8 of those. Okay. So that was 0. Now we go to 1. I know this is just totally sexy stuff in a text editor. So replace all, and it should be, yeah, we got those. So we got to do this with each of these. Better make sure I'm at the beginning of my document here. There we go. Cool. And just in case. So V1. So let's go back here. Let's see. I think I put the wrong thing in there. Oops, my bad. Yeah, it's U1. Sorry. Okay. It's DM, NM. You guys don't laugh at how clumsy I am at doing this part of things. I hate this part, but sometimes it's a better way than actually messing around inside the program. All right. Okay. Let's make sure we go back and do this correctly. Do it in the right order. Right. Alright, so there we got all that. And I believe DM3 is next. And then once I replace all of these, I'll go through and do a find and replace to correct the file path so it finds these in the right place. That should work, unless I totally screwed up plugging something in here, which is quite possible, because trying to describe this and talk about it while doing it is sort of like, you know, rubbing your head and patting your belly. All right, so there we've got all of those. Now let's find our file path, and where this says Alien Allure, we should point it to Alien Aggro. So let's just do, I want to grab enough of that string right there. Aggro, replace all. Oh, I didn't want to do that. Yeah, if I do a find and replace on all of that, then it's going to replace it for, you know what? Just for the sake of doing this quickly, I'm going to copy some things here. Yeah, I know this is still totally magical. Totally magical. Let's grab that mouth. That's really what we need, is the mouth, and then these eye parts. And I'm just shoving these in here for the moment just to make this go a little faster. There we go. Now let's save that. And in theory, this ought to work. We shall see. It's probably not. I probably messed something up. Nope, it worked. Sweet. And yes, that surprise you hear in my voice is genuine, because I really thought that I messed up somewhere along the way. So now let's go in here and take a quick look, see if we have our morph turned on. We do. That's great. Now let's turn on good old array. Nice. That's what I was shooting for. Very much so. Very, very cool. Very, very cool. Just for the sake of checking it out, let's throw our original ornamental clothing on here. Of course, it picks up those morphs. They carry right on through. And then let's apply a render preset, which I have a pile of those. Render presets, array, and yeah, these are mine, by the way. These are my crazy presets, pulled from all kinds of things. A lot of them pulled from HDRs that are actually in the algorithmic stuff. So there's that. This one's kind of cool. Let's maybe try something else. There we go. And then, just for the sake of checking, let's go grab somebody's poses. Just apply some standing pose here. And there you go. Alien Aggro is born. I'm quite pleased with that. Let's just for the sake of, just for fun, let's throw her sister out here. We can look at them side by side. And just move that around. Here we go. And then let's drop the same clothing on there just for the sake of comparison. And there you have it. Nice variation on the same race, same concept, you know, same sort of alien concept, just a completely different sculpt with a different feel to it, and all done in right at around 2 hours, around 2 hours time. So if you follow along with what I've got going here, you also, you know, one of the things that I think was really cool, if you follow along with it, you'll see, you know, it's like you can get great results without ever having to use a single texture resource, without having to use a single reference, any of that stuff. Just some very simple paint techniques and a little bit of surface sculpting can yield some absolutely incredible results. So, I mean, not that I'm going to call this incredible. I think I could probably put a little more love into it, a little bit more time. But for 2 hours time, you know, I'm very happy with the results of that. So, anyway, there you have it. That's going to bring us to a close for today. And yeah, you know, I'm very happy with the results there. Glad to see some folks coming out and hanging out with us today. Thanks to everybody for being here. Of course, as always, thanks to Jason and Terry and the folks at CGBytes for putting these things together. Till next time, I am Les from 6S1. You guys keep making cool stuff. Bye-bye.